Hi everyone. Today you're going to get your warm-up from Canvas as always, and you can download it and use your own paper or print it and write on here. Give it a try. It's just the same material that we learned last class with a confidence interval for the difference in proportions. So use your notes from last class or check your understanding from last class, and then we'll go over the answers in 1 second. All right, so here we have our answers. Remember, the parameter is basically what comes after. Parameter of interest is what comes after confidence interval 4. Right there. And then you just put it in context. The appropriate conditions, we have random 10% and large counts. Remember, you have to check for each sample. Slash population, since you check both stuff. Then the critical value and standard error, these formulas are on your formula sheet. Not for critical value, these are just what we do with inverse norm or your table A. And then this one you can get on the formula sheet. No need to memorize it. And then the interval itself is also kind of available on the formula sheet. I'll show you, and then your interpretation. So for the formula sheet, let me just show you a couple of things. First, here's the interval itself. So let's make sure you guys see that confidence interval. Statistic plus or minus critical value times standard error of statistic. We're going to learn several confidence intervals, but right now our statistic is either p hat or p hat 1 minus p hat 2. And then we'll learn more than one critical value, but right now it's always a z star. And then your standard error of the statistic then is S of p hat or S of p hat 1 minus p hat 2. And we're going to learn a few more in this semester, but those are them for now. We'll worry about chi-square and the test statistic later. I'll show you here. Basically, all of your statistics are in this column. So I'm just going to highlight this and write statistic. Then this column is your parameter. And then here is your population standard deviation, so we don't use that for intervals. And then here is your standard error. So this column is your S of p hat or p hat 1 minus p hat 2. So here are those two values right there. And so you don't need to memorize anything. All you do is just know where to find them on your formula sheet. So I have my statistic is the difference in the p hats, my critical value is a z star, and then my standard error formula was right there for me to use and plug in. Hopefully that helps with knowing where to find the information and then being able to do that on your own in the future. All right, I want you to get out the worksheet that says, can you walk and talk or text? Because I don't know how many of you are actually talking on the phone, but maybe texting. So what this is really is just a general review of what we've learned, but we're going to put it all together because there's something called the 4-step process that you'll need to be able to do all of the steps without being prompted at all. And so I want you to do first this problem 1 through 5, and then I'll explain which step is which afterwards. And then we'll do a couple problems where you have to do all of those steps on your own without being prompted. And so we've got a cute little acronym for you, but for now, just go ahead and do 1 through 5. It's a quick little review of what we've learned, and then we will debrief afterwards. Okay, so number 1 says state the parameter you want to estimate and the confidence level 90%. Number 2 says identify the appropriate inference method. So we have something that we call the 4-step process. And for us, it spells out the word pass. Your textbook is going to use something called state, plan, do, conclude. And that's the same thing as pass for us. So first up, we have the P. I'm just going to put a big P off to the side, and that stands for parameter and procedure. So here we've identified the parameter, and then here the appropriate inference method is our procedure. And so at the top of each of our notes, we always put the name of the procedure, and we'll explain today a little bit more about how to identify that name. But we knew it was one sample because we could see that it was only one sample here. So that's one sample. And then remember, whatever it's for that's your parameter. So for P there. And then proportions are always Z for the procedure name. Right there. Okay. Next, we checked our conditions. I like to label that as the A in pass. And so A, to me, stands for assumptions and conditions, really just conditions, but PCSS isn't as catchy as PASS, so pass. And so we have our same three, random 10%, large counts. Then once the conditions are met, perform calculations. So that's the S. Perform calculations is going to be called statistical work. And so there we put our formula and fill in the formula. So I like you to write the formula, fill in formula, calculate values. In this case, the interval. And then the last S is your interpretation. And so what that means is summary sentence. And so in this case, we are blank percent. And we'll learn a few more summary sentences, just actually one more summary sentence for tests when we get to the next part of our unit. But right now, we're on intervals. So our 4-step process spelled out the word pass. This worksheet prompted you to do each part, but what we'll do for our check your understanding is it's going to be blank, and you have to do all 4 parts on your own. So for here, for our notes, I just have the most basic definition here of what pass is. This will work for all inference. And we have 2 types of inference, intervals and tests. So far, we've only learned intervals. So that is why everything has been specific for that. But for your procedure name, we only have 1 or 2 samples. You'll choose. And then you'll choose there. And then here you insert the parameter. A couple of things about that. Z is for proportions. T is for means. We haven't learned means yet, so that's not relevant to you. And then our statistical work, remember, I want you to 1, write formula, 2, fill in the formula, and 3, calculate. So you have to follow that 4-step process to do any problem. Basically, the 4-step process is the directions on 1 through 5. Just make sure you get all of those done without being prompted. So you'll look at your check your understanding. There's 2 fully blank pages basically in the check your understanding. And so you'll need to try to see if you can get all that stuff taken care of in those blank pages. And then we will go over the answers. So pause and give it a try. Using the 4-step process, use the acronym to help you. And then if you forgot anything, you can unpause to see what you missed. All right, so a couple of things. Here is the answer itself. So that this whole thing is the answer. If I like I said before, when I like to do math problems, I used to highlight the answer. I would be highlighting the whole page. This whole page is the answer. I'm going to label some things. Remember, this is the procedure name. And then this is our parameter. Whenever you define the word parameter, you have to have the word true in there. And then proportion, because that's what it is. We need to be in context. We got our assumptions and conditions. Always the same 3. And then we have the formula. This is the formula. This is filled in. And then this is our calculation. So I always want to see all 3 things there. And then here we have our summary sentence that we interpret for the last line. So hopefully you were able to do that. Make sure you have all of these things taken care of before you try the next one so that you don't have to fix anything twice. We want you to fix your problem now, get it right on the next one, and then we'll be done. All right. So again, we have our procedure and our parameter. Now, if you're not sure how to identify the procedure, on this one, it's obvious that we have 2 samples because we have 650 subjects took acetaminophen and 347 who took ibuprofen. So that's where we have 2 samples. And so here we just had, I'll just highlight here, 125 women. And so that is 1 sample. And then I really, this one, I'm sorry, I didn't notice this a minute ago. This should say 1 sample Z interval for P. We want to follow this criteria. 1 or 2 samples, Z interval or test for, and so that's what I should have done there. Same thing here. To sample. I wouldn't get that wrong on the AP exam or anything, but I just want you guys to be consistent with what I wrote in the notes. Okay, so that's how I know it was 2 samples because you see the 2 samples right there. Proportions are always Z. This is an interval because it says the word interval right there. That's how I know to put interval, and that's all we've learned so far anyway. And then we have our parameter here that we put next. I like to label my 2 samples separately here so I can show each one's conditions without missing any. So I do the little table. I think that's the most helpful. And then remember for intervals, we can put our successes and failures for each. Always whole numbers. And don't forget to say approximately normal here, there, and there, because that's an important part of the large counts condition. And again, we have, undo. Again, we have our formula. Then we have it filled in. And then we have our calculation. I don't need to see each piece of the calculation. That's just the final answer there. And then we interpret it. So hopefully you're able to see all those steps come together on these 2 problems. And if not, just keep asking your teacher for more practice. So we have plenty of practice for you to do. We will come back to this next class before you take a quiz on confidence intervals. So you'll have a quiz on confidence intervals. Your homework today is to study using the Chapter 8 practice test in Sapling, and then you'll have your quiz next class. Okay, have a great day. Thank you so much for your participation. See you next time.